Imagine a world where the way we make everything, like from your phone to your medication, is being fundamentally reshaped.
Yeah,
It's no longer just about pure efficiency, is it? It feels like something deeper now, more strategic.
definitely.
Welcome to the deep dive. We take complex topics, break them down, give you the essential insights.
And today, we're really diving into a fascinating shift in global economics.
That's right, industrial policy. It's a concept, well, many of us might associate with the past, maybe,
Uh-huh.
but it's making this powerful comeback, and it's changing, like, the very fabric of global supply chains.
And we've got some great source material for this, a new editorial from the Journal of International Business Policy. It's called Navigating Industrial Policy and Global Value Chains in an Era of Disruptions.
That's pretty relevant.
It is. And this deep dive, well, it'll guide you through their core framework. It shows how recent global events are basically forcing governments and companies, too, to rethink, well, everything.
So our mission today, really, is to give you a shortcut, a way to understand this crucial transformation.
Yeah.
We'll unpack why nations are, increasingly prioritizing security, maybe resilience, over just pure economic gain.
And what that actually means for how things get made and moved around the globe.
Exactly. So let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Okay, industrial policy. Like I said, it sounds a bit like something from a dusty history book, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. You hear the term, you think governments actively trying to shape their economies. Old school stuff.
But it's clearly not just history anymore.
Not at all. You're absolutely right. I mean, the concept, it actually goes way back.
Yeah.
Figures like Alexander Hamilton in the U.S., 18th century.
Wow, okay.
And Friedrich List in 19th century Germany.
Yeah.
Then it really picked up steam after World War II.
Right, with strategies like...
Import substituting industrialization, ISI,
Yeah.
building up domestic industries, replacing imports.
Exactly. And the flip side, export promoting industrialization, EOI. Focused on boosting exports to drive growth. I really like that image Pascal Lamy used, the former WTO head.
Oh, yeah.
The old world versus the new world of trade. Old world, national production, trading finished goods.
Pretty straightforward. But the new world, as he put it, that's defined by transnational production, organized in these global value chains, GVCs.
GVCs, right, where value gets added across loads of different countries, components zipping around.
Yeah, exactly. And historically, industrial policy kind of lined up with that prosperity-driven phase of globalization.
But then something changed, big time. What brought industrial policy roaring back, especially after it was, well, largely discredited, wasn't it, by that neoliberal Washington consensus in the 80s and 90s?
It was, yeah. That consensus was all about free markets, minimal government.
So what happened?
Well, it was really a series of major disruptions, kicking off around the mid-2000s.
Okay.
You got the 2008 financial crisis, for starters.
Yeah.
Then the huge shock of a COVID-19 pandemic to supply chains. Then the rise of economic nationalism. You see it everywhere.
Yeah.
And, of course, big geopolitical conflicts. Russia, Ukraine. The U.S.-China rivalry heating up.
So all these things together.
They really pushed industrial policy, moved it away from just being about prosperity towards a much more security-driven agenda.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, I think. This source material points out something quite striking.
What's that?
That for ages, these two academic fields, industrial policy and global value chains, they barely interacted. They were like ships in the night.
That's true, a real disconnect.
Why? Why was that? They seem so obviously linked now.
Well, there were two main reasons, according to the source. First, just the intense ideological battles around industrial policy itself.
The free market thing again?
Exactly. It was often painted as anti-free market. So you got what the source calls decades of ideologically motivated willful neglect from the GVC scholars.
Wow. Willful neglect.
Yeah. The debate was stuck on whether governments should intervene, not how they actually were intervening or could intervene effectively.
Okay, so ideology was one barrier. What was the second?
It was about their different locational emphasis, where they focused their attention.
Meaning?
Industrial policy traditionally looked within a country. The goal was building entire domestic industries, from scratch if needed.
Right, national focus.
But the GVC literature, it took a between-country approach. It argued that countries and firms could advance, could upgrade, just by specializing, finding a niche, a specific stage within these big integrated global industries.
So fundamentally different views on how development happens.
Completely. One's about building the whole thing at home, the other's about plugging into the global system effectively.
So given that history, Why does bridging this gap matter so much now? What changes when we bring these perspectives together?
Well, because the reality of making things in the 21st century is that domestic industries are deeply tangled up in these complex global networks. You can't separate them easily.
Sure.
And the disruptions we just talked about, COVID, geopolitics, they absolutely demand what the source calls a more nuanced and realistic view of how countries and firms actually operate within GVCs.
And resilience is key here.
Absolutely. GVC research shows that resilience isn't just one thing, it's multidimensional. It's not only national security, it's also about operational efficiency for companies, day to day. And it's about how the supply chains themselves are governed.
So ignoring either side, the industrial policy side or the GVC side, leaves you with a big blind spot.
Precisely. You need both perspectives to see the full picture.
Okay, so to help us navigate this new landscape, the authors propose this integrative framework, like a map, you said.
Exactly. Think of it as a map for this disrupted world, guiding us through the complexities of industrial policy and GVCs working together or sometimes against each other.
And it's built on two key dimensions.
That's right, two dimensions. The first one is the level of economic development, basically distinguishing between advanced economies and emerging economies.
Because they have different capabilities, different priorities.
Vastly different. Capabilities, institutions, strategic goals. Advanced economies often have the lead firms, the ones controlling the high-value stuff like R&D and branding.
While emerging economies traditionally started with lower value manufacturing.
Yeah, that was often the entry point.
Yeah.
Specializing in assembly or less complex production stages.
Okay, so development level is one axis. What's the other dimension on this map?
The second dimension is the prevailing geopolitical context. Are we talking about an era of global integration or one of geopolitical fragmentation?
Right, big difference.
Huge. Global integration, roughly 1980s to the mid-2010s, that was all about efficiency logic. Trade liberalization, lowering barriers.
And fragmentation, that's now.
That's largely now, yeah. From the 2010s onward, here the priorities shift. Resilience, strategic autonomy, national security, these become much more important.
So putting those two dimensions together, development level and geopolitical context, that gives us a 2x2 grid, right? 4 different scenarios.
Exactly. 4 distinct strategic orientations. And the framework also adds another layer, this idea of inside-out versus outside-in policies.
Explain those quickly.
Sure. Inside-out policies are basically domestic actions aimed at creating global impacts. Think about turning your national champions into global players.
Okay. Building from home outwards.
Right. Whereas outside-in policies work the other way. They channel external activities like foreign investment or trade inward to achieve domestic goals. And these can be supportive, like attracting FDI, or restrictive, like tariffs or screening investments.
Got it. That distinction seems really key to understanding how countries are playing the game now.
It's crucial. It really shapes their strategic playbook in the current era.
Okay, that paints a really clear picture. Let's walk through these 4 quadrants, these strategic orientations, and see how industrial policy and GVCs interact in each one.
Sounds good.
Let's start with Quadrant 1, advanced economies during global integration. The strategy was creating winners. What did that actually look like on the ground?
Right, so the main goal then was national competitiveness, capturing the high-value parts of the chain, the innovation, the design, the branding.
The smile curve, they call it sometimes.
Exactly, the smile curve of value creation. Where the big profits are at the beginning, R&D, and the end, marketing and sales, not so much in the middle manufacturing bit.
So the policies were inside out.
Primarily inside out, yeah. Supporting their lead firms, providing subsidies, think Airbus versus Boeing, classic example. Pushing domestic R&D to stay ahead technologically.
And what did that mean for GVCs back then?
It meant the lead firms from these advanced economies were really orchestrating global production. They'd outsource, offshore the manufacturing bits to lower cost places.
But keep control.
Oh, yeah. They kept tight control over coordination, the key technologies, intellectual property. They managed the chain to maximize their own value capture.
Makes sense. Okay, Quadrant 2. Emerging economies during that same global integration period. Their strategy. Enabling latecomer catch-up. How did they approach it?
Theirs was mainly an outside-in logic. They actively worked to attract foreign direct investment, FDI.
Right. Get those big multinationals to set up shop.
Exactly, and get linked into GVCs. The idea was to absorb advanced technology, learn by doing, build up their own capabilities, and really expand their exports.
Can you give examples?
Oh, sure. Think of the developmental states in East Asia, South Korea, Taiwan. They strategically supported key sectors like heavy industry, often by giving them access to imported parts while protecting their home market a bit.
And China's massive growth story fits right in here too, presumably.
Absolutely. China's a prime example. Their whole exchanging market for technology policy back in the 90s.
Right, letting foreign firms in but making them share tech.
Yeah. And later stuff like Made in China 2025, it's all about systematically using that outside engagement, that GVC participation, to build up their own domestic capabilities, moving up the value chain.
Okay, so that was the integration era. Now let's pivot to the present. Geopolitical fragmentation. Quadrant 3 is advanced economies now, their strategy.
Enhancing economic security. Big shift.
A very decisive shift, yeah. Moving away from that pure efficiency focus.
Why? What's the thinking?
Well, governments in these countries now largely see that deep global interdependence not just as efficient, but as a potential strategic risk, a vulnerability.
So the policies become more restrictive.
Increasingly restrictive and often outside in a negative way. We're seeing more tariffs, much tougher screening of inward foreign investment.
Even outright bans.
Even direct bans on certain technologies or companies, yeah. Think about the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, the way it links tax credits for EV batteries to where the minerals are sourced or processed. That's a clear example.
So policies like, say, Biden's Chi-Offs and Science Act, or even Trump's tariffs before that, they're not just about protecting jobs, are they? They're actively trying to reshape GVCs. That's exactly right. The main goal is often to reshore production, or put back home, or nearshore and move it closer, maybe to Mexico or Canada for the U.S.
More friendshoring.
Or friendshoring, yeah, shifting it to politically allied countries. It's all driven by wanting more domestic resilience, more control over those critical supply chains.
And GVC governance changes too.
Fundamentally, it moves from being just about efficiency to having these security mandates baked in. And sometimes, controversially, you see GVCs being weaponized for geopolitical goals.
Wow. Okay, that sounds like a really tough environment for emerging economies. Quadrant 4, emerging economies under geopolitical fragmentation. Their strategy, strengthening supplier resilience. How do they even cope?
Yeah, this quadrant really highlights how vulnerable they can be. They're caught in the crossfire, often.
They can't just decouple, can they?
Generally, no. They can't afford to completely cut themselves off from global markets.
Yeah.
So they're forced into these hybrid approaches.
Mixing strategy.
Exactly. A mix of, say, selective outside-in coupling, being careful about which foreign investments they encourage or allow, combined with more proactive inside-out efforts to build their own domestic capabilities.
All aimed at becoming more resilient suppliers so they don't get dropped.
Precisely. Strengthening supplier resilience is the name of the game. So they aren't completely dependent or easily replaceable when geopolitical winds shift.
Can you give us some real-world examples of this juggling act? It
Yeah.
sounds incredibly tricky.
It is tricky. Think about Mexico.
Yeah.
Became the top U.S. import partner last year, right?
Yeah.
So it's a key nearshoring destination for the U.S. Huge opportunity. But at the same time, it faces uncertainty from potential U.S. tariffs, and it's under pressure regarding its own investments from China. Talk about walking a tightrope.
Definitely. Any others?
Well, you see emerging economies diversifying where they operate. South Korean clothing firms expanding into Central America, maybe to reduce reliance on Asia. Or look at Thai Union, big seafood company. They're using their processing expertise to move into pet food, protein supplements, diversifying their business.
And Foxconn, the big electronics manufacturer.
Yeah, Foxconn's interesting, evolving from just being a low-cost manufacturer for Apple and others towards being a broader technology solutions provider. That's about moving beyond just competing on cost, towards competing on capabilities. It's adaptation, pure and simple.
These 4 quadrants, they really bring the framework to life. But the source material also digs into some broader themes cutting across these strategies, right? Based on new research.
It does, yeah. Several really important cross-cutting themes emerge from the recent studies cited.
What stands out most?
Well, first, definitely disruptions and resilience.
Yeah.
There's a great case study on Kazakhstan looking at its uranium and medicine supply chains. It shows how they navigated things before and after the Russia-Ukraine war and COVID. They pursued this pragmatic inclusivity, basically, cooperating globally where possible, but always pushing their own national interests to build resilience.
And advanced economies dealing with resilience.
Yeah, there's a study on Sweden's detailed policies to handle chronic shortages of antibiotics. That's a clear example of an advanced economy enhancing economic security in a really critical sector.
And climate change must be a huge factor in all this, too, a massive long-term disruption.
Oh, absolutely. It's layered on top of everything else. There are studies looking at the carbon footprint implications of reshoring manufacturing back to the EU, for example.
Right. Does bringing production home increase emissions?
It can, yeah. Depends how it's done. And other studies look at how latecomer economies might join new GVCs related to green hydrogen or renewable energy, but it adds complexity.
Yeah.
Well, firms and governments in emerging economies, they now have to meet tougher environmental standards, often set by buyers in advanced economies, while they're also trying to build that supplier resilience we talked about. It's a double challenge.
So with all these pressures, geopolitics, climate, resilience, how are the actual GVC configurations changing? What do they look like now?
They're shifting significantly, moving away from decisions based purely on economic logic towards what the source calls security-embedded governance.
Meaning security concerns are baked into how chains are structured?
Exactly. Reshoring efforts in critical sectors, you see it in the EU with antibiotics, batteries, semiconductor chips. That's a direct result of this enhancing economic security drive.
And governments setting new rules.
Increasingly, governments are setting standards, environmental standards, local content requirements that directly shape where GVC activities happen. The Italian fashion industry is a fascinating example here.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, Made in Italy rules can help small firms that reshore production back to Italy. But the research shows it only really works if those firms can plug back into dense local networks of subcontractors and suppliers.
So just bringing the factory back isn't enough. You need the whole ecosystem around it.
Precisely. The policy needs that complementary ecosystem development to actually be effective.
Which brings us to the inevitable tensions and trade-offs. This isn't smooth sailing for everyone. Who wins, who loses.
That's a key point. What's really striking is how the old logic efficiency, above all, is weakening, and the security logic is getting much stronger.
And that creates vulnerabilities.
Yes, and they're often asymmetric, unevenly distributed. Reshoring, for instance, might look like a win-win for an advanced economy, boost domestic industry, maybe creates jobs. But it could really disadvantage the suppliers in emerging markets who relied on that outsourced production. They might lose out significantly.
Like the Kazakhstan example again.
Yeah, Kazakhstan's choices really reflect those tough trade-offs, navigating pressures from powerful neighbors like Russia and China. Emerging economies are constantly trying to find these complex hybrid paths forward.
And looking beyond the obvious drivers like COVID or efficiency versus security, what are the new drivers of industrial policy that are really shaping things now? Things maybe we didn't see as much before.
Well, multipolarity is one. The world isn't dominated by just one or two powers anymore. Strategic autonomy is another huge driver. You see the EU pushing hard for this in areas like clean vehicles or cybersecurity. They want less dependence.
And you mentioned weaponized interdependence?
Yes, that's becoming a defining feature. It's basically when states deliberately manipulate power imbalances within these global networks. Supply chains, finance, tech for strategic advantage. You see it in critical minerals, the mining sector, or sometimes involving state-owned enterprises, like in the Kazakhstan study. And regional conflicts are huge drivers too. Russia-Ukraine's impact on Kazakhstan is one example, or the China-Taiwan tensions, constantly fueling semiconductor industrial policies worldwide.
It's a complex web. Finally, the source material really stresses the need for good data and policy insights, right? How are researchers even measuring all this stuff?
The data work is actually incredibly impressive now. Researchers are using high-quality, often very granular data and sophisticated methods.
Like what?
Okay, so for that EU carbon footprint study on reshoring, they used a multi-regional input-output model, basically a giant economic map covering 66 countries.
Wow.
Yeah, it lets them track how products and money flow between industries and countries, so they can precisely simulate the environmental impact of bringing production of, say, 5 strategic products back to the EU under different scenarios.
That's incredibly detailed.
It is. Or the Italian fashion study that used survey data from over 750 small firms to actually test how effective those Made in Italy policies were.
And the Swedish antibiotics?
That research used detailed data sets covering 138 different generic antibiotics, tracking actual supplies and identifying hundreds of shortages over time. It's this level of detail that allows policymakers, hopefully, to make much more informed decisions about these super complex, interconnected issues.
This has been fascinating. This deep dive really shows that this whole world of industrial policy and global value chains, it's anything but static.
Absolutely not.
We've clearly moved from an era focused mostly on prosperity, on efficiency, to this really complex dance now with security and resilience.
Yeah, and I think the core insight really is that making good decisions in this new era of disruptions, it needs much more sophisticated approaches. You can't just rely on simple inside-out or outside-in thinking anymore.
And this idea of complete national self-sufficiency.
It's basically an illusion, right? Even for products that seem simple, the world is just too interconnected now. Trying to make absolutely everything at home is likely unachievable and probably incredibly expensive.
What strikes me most, though, is this huge paradox we seem to be facing.
Which is?
This escalating pressure to deglobalize, to de-risk, to pull back, happening at the exact same time as we face these massive global challenges, climate change, future pandemics that absolutely demand more cross-border collaboration, not less.
That's the critical tension right there. You've hit the nail on the head. And navigating that tension,
Yeah.
well, that's the challenge.
So how do we make industrial policy work better going forward, given all this?
Well, based on the research, it seems to require a combination of things. You need that high-quality data we talked about. You need clear, manageable goals for your policies. You need capable domestic firms that can actually respond. A skilled workforce is vital.
And coordination.
And seamless coordination, not just within government, but with suppliers, with buyers, right across the entire value chain, often globally. It's a tall order.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening right now?
Well, it means the choices being made today by governments, by companies, they're going to fundamentally reshape not just economies, but potentially our daily lives, the products we rely on, where they come from, how secure those supplies are.
We're living through a pretty foundational shift, aren't we?
We really are.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. In this new era where security so often seems to trump pure efficiency, how are we collectively going to balance our national interests with those huge global challenges that demand collaboration? And maybe more pointedly, what's the ultimate price and the ultimate benefit of the trade-offs we make?
Something to definitely chew on.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the evolving world of industrial policy and global value chains.
Our pleasure.
We really hope you feel more informed and maybe even inspired to explore these fascinating and, frankly, crucial complexities further.